Welcome to the Warchant recruiting roundtable. We wanted to kind of do things a little different, get this cycle, going. Very exciting. Fortunately, we have a good friend of mine, a guy that I've known for years. Runs a lot of the national recruiting. Is in Chad Simmons. Chad Simmons, the On3 national analyst. Chad, first off, we're excited to have you here. Obviously, joined by Matt Lasser, that's with our beat writer. It does a lot of different things, but Chad, I guess the first thing that I'm interested in because I know you've covered him a lot is four-star running back Usman Kromah. You've covered him a lot. Just how massive was that flip for FSU to add him, and then two, just what is he going to bring kind of to that offense? Because you've studied him so much throughout your years of covering FSU recruiting.
Yeah, Michael, first off, thanks for having me for sure. Happy to be here, man. You guys are the best in the business at the War Chant. Been around for a long time. Been following y'all's work at Florida State too, doing what y'all do. But Kromah was huge for Florida State. Obviously Georgia did all they could to hang on there. They battled literally until even after he announced a flip to Florida State that afternoon. He didn't sign the papers right away. It took a few hours. And I
Yeah.
mean, he was playing in a big state semifinal game up at Milton on the road that weekend, just 2 days later. So a lot was going on for Lee County, Kromah, that program. So a big decision for him and a huge win for Florida State, being able to get him out of the home state, University of Georgia, a school, Georgia, that he loved and he had connections to. And even the running backs coach at Georgia used to coach at Lee County, had a special connection there. So, big win. And I give a lot of credit there in that win. Covering his recruitment from start to finish was Mike Norvell. I mean, you can talk about position coaches, you can talk about different people on that staff or the community in Tallahassee or the tradition of Florida State. You can talk about all of that. All that may have factored in somewhere, but the lead guy here, without question, was Mike Norvell. And just that personal relationship, that to me, that's what pushed Florida State in the end to the top and kind of feeling like a coveted guy, a guy that can come in, be an impact player at Florida State right away. So really credit is deserved for Mike Norvell doing a great job staying consistent, not giving up, being aggressive but not too aggressive, doing really pushing the right buttons there. And it's a thin line to walk there as a head coach. What do you do? What do you say? When to do it? And it all fell right for Florida State. And the player there, Usman, is a guy that looks like a big, old school traditional back, but to me, looks can be deceiving there. He's a guy that can catch the football. He has some wiggle. He can get out in space. I saw him return kicks in his high school career. He can do a lot of different things. Don't let the body of, 6 foot, 6'1", 210, 215 make people think he's just a between the tackles kind of guy, because he can get on the perimeter. He can go the distance. He can. The biggest thing for me watching him play, watching him in camps, all the different things, is his ball skills. To me, that's a real strength of his. He's shown he can get on that wheel route, make a big play down the field. He can catch the screen, get in space. So to me, great kid, high character, cares about the academics, and a very good, well-rounded running back as well.
Also a decent basketball player. Yeah, so
Yeah.
plays a lot of hoops,
And
but
I'll say this, the key thing is he loves shoes. He's a shoe game guy. He talks about shoes with Mike Norvell. Every time I would come down, we talk about shoes, and he talks about different coaches, their shoe game, what they wear, Nike,
yeah,
Jordan, whatever. And
yeah,
so he's just a fun kid to be around. He'll be a great personality, at Florida State.
yeah. And then I think the one that really we were on it a lot with Tylon Lee. Uh, I know On3 made him a 5 star. You've watched a lot of his film out of Pace, obviously a Panhandle kid, but just what really attracted you guys, as him as a 5 star? What really just jumped out at you? Because I know there was a big transformation with his body that he really adjusted, where he went from I think 215 to like 260 and around there. But just what was the thing that really just you guys loved?
Yeah, I mean, props obviously to Charles Power and Cody Belair, the two leaders for us in the scouting
Yeah,
department at On3. I mean, great call, great find. And like you said, he went up to, I think, what, 261 ish, I believe,
yeah,
pushing 6'6", super long arms. And, you know, looking at what he did as a senior, I think what 40 plus tackles for loss,
Yeah.
just kind of showed that relentlessness. I mean, that the speed off the ball. Charles broke him down just as a big athlete that can get after the quarterback, and kind of looks like right away the next in line to be potential high round draft pick at Florida State that rushes the quarterback and sacks guys in the ACC. But obviously, his recruitment was wild. I mean, obviously UCF, Ole Miss, Florida State. That the key was FSU got the last visit, and that's always been important in recruiting. You want to make that last impression before either a kid commits whenever that time comes or he signs, obviously now in December. Used to be about February where guys going to get those late January OVs back in the Bobby Bowden days and have that flash and big flare on signing day and sign 10 to 15 high profile guys. Now it's about getting that. This year was Thanksgiving weekend, getting those kids on campus and away from turkey and dressing and their families to come try to get them part of that class. And to me, that made a huge impact. They had him on campus before. Obviously, he's a local kid. He knew the staff, all that helped. But I think the key was getting him back on campus, kind of laying out their plan for him in 48 hours, showing him how he can be an impact player right away. How, yes, we had a down year. We're going to rebound quickly next year. Show him their plan for that as well as a team, as a program to get back to that ACC championship, get back to a playoff contender. And all that hit home. And then you tied in, again, a couple hours from home, easy for his family to get to. They've had success getting guys drafted at that position in recent years. So I think all that played a big factor and was a huge win, just as big as Kromah was. I would even say Tylon even a little bit bigger for Florida State, on signing day.
Yeah, to kind of say what they might to kind of add on to that, man. His body transformation was insane from when FSU first offered him. I remember seeing him at that camp when they offered him. I think like 2 years ago. And there was a big gap from them recruiting him, from getting that offer. There wasn't much visits or anything until that official visit right before he ended up flipping to Florida State. But he was super skinny to the point where when you saw him come on that OV later on the recruitment, he was almost unrecognizable, like looked like a completely different human being. It was insane. And then just to talk about him being a 5-star, I got to see his reaction firsthand, and it was incredible. He was really excited. Great kid. I mean, we talked about Usman. Chad talked about Usman being a high character kid. Tylon's kind of right there too. I've always said this since I've started doing this, but Mike Norvell does a really good job of recruiting those high character kids, so it keeps that culture going in the locker room.
And just to add on that, you have to love kids like that. Look, I did recruiting for a lot. I've been in this business for 20 plus years, man. And so trust me, we get a lot of hate about rankings, and we get from players and, their people, their circle, whoever it may be. Yes, there is some positive moments in that, but to see a kid like that, like you mentioned, Matt, you kind of be that receptive. It means something to him. He's thankful for it. I can tell you, and we all know this, there's not many thank yous in this world anymore, no matter what you're doing, whether it doesn't matter. It's just not the world that we live in anymore. It's all about negativity for the most part. So to hear that kind of reaction, it means a lot to me.
Yeah.
To tell me what kind of person that he, like you mentioned, that he is as well. And just to add on to all this stuff, I mean, I love the flips that Florida State has laid. I mean, Shamar Arnaud going from Auburn to Florida State, another Georgia kid. I live in Georgia. I've seen Shamar a lot. Obviously, he's from the state of Florida, has roots down around Miami area. That was a big flip. LeJesse Harrell going from LSU to Florida State. I think he can make an early impact as a pass rush guy too. So it wasn't just about, Kromah or even Lee, but it was a big finish, quote unquote, flip season for Florida State, late in the process.
Yeah, and then I think Matt wants to kind of ask a little bit about an intriguing signing they had in Chase Lofton, a tight end. I know you guys liked a lot. Really good pass catcher, but I'll let Matt take the floor on that.
Yeah, so Chase Lofton was one. They got him in the summer after his official visit, but it kind of seemed like Nebraska was making a push there at the end, and it's so hard to get these kids out of Nebraska, right? You almost write that they go to the Cornhuskers immediately out of that state. It's just hard to pull kids out of there. How big is that for Florida State, just brand wise and stuff like that, to be able to go to a state like that and grab one of the best guys, one of the best tight ends there?
Yeah, I just think it's big on the outside for fans watching that they knew, like you said, he's from Nebraska. We all know that there's only Nebraska football in that state. We know all the record sellouts they have, the tradition they have at Nebraska. How, like you said, it's almost like me covering the South in like Mississippi. When there's a top kid in Mississippi, they're probably going to stay home either and go to Starkville, Mississippi State, or Oxford with Ole Miss. Now, there's a few others that can, like maybe Saban can pull one here and there, or LSU here and there, but most of the time those kids stay home. They're just homegrown fans of the program. And it was big. I mean, and I think it's big from the perception side where everyone knew Matt Rule was going to do all he could to keep Lofton at home, flip him from Florida State. They're going to throw the in-state program, the tradition, stay home, rep the home state. We know they're a big player in the NIL game. That's huge in the industry now as well. They're going to make him a strong offer from an NIL to stay home. Life after football, come to Nebraska, graduate here, you're set for life. You get a job after football. But FSU held on. And I will be one to say that I thought, at one time, maybe more than one time, in my time and my intel was leading me to lean towards Nebraska, flipping Lofton from Florida State. But for them to hold on, going through, obviously, the season that didn't go the way they wanted it to, losing commitments at times. Obviously, they closed strong and grabbed some late. But I think he was a big one to hang on to for on the field and off the field reasons. I think, again, the perception that everybody knew he was a target for Matt Rule and that in-state program. And we knew about the struggles Florida State had throughout the season. The openings were there. Nebraska could not capitalize. Florida State held on, and he'll make a big impact. He's a guy, like you said, can catch the football. He's a big body. He'll play physical. He'll bring some leadership into that locker room as well. And look, man, he's a Midwestern, whatever area that is in the country guy, that cornfields, lifts weights,
Yeah.
football mentality. He loves to work. He'll bring that mentality down to Tallahassee, which is another plus in landing Chase Lofton.
Yeah, and kind of follow up with Chad. I've heard a lot of positive things in the early fresh or even workouts that they're doing with tour duty. For a lot of positive things when they get out there and work out together. I know the FSU staff is very high on kind of what Chad's point was. This is basically essentially a big receiver, not so much a tight end because he gets open so much. So to that, and then the last guy, Chad, just to finish it off real quick, Kevin Wynn. You followed that one. You covered that one really closely. I know Georgia, South Carolina. I was at the point, Chad, where I really thought that he was going to go to either Georgia or South Carolina. I really didn't feel like he was going to stick. And then obviously Odell was a big part of, even though he's not, defense line or on the staff anymore, I felt Odell's presence was, even just being at FSU was a big deal. And then the new job by Terrence Knighton, I think, was incredible as far as really holding on to him. Because I don't know about you, Chad. I really didn't think he was going to stick, leading up to his final moments.
Yeah, I didn't think. I think I got the call maybe like 8:30, 9 o'clock that morning of this. I think it's December 4th, that early signing day it was, I believe it was. I got the call from a source that told me he's going to stick, and he was, he had strong conversations, like you mentioned, South Carolina and Georgia. I felt Carolina was the bigger threat maybe leading up. Georgia was always there. But those last couple of days, I heard a lot more about Georgia than I did Carolina being the threat to Florida State. They were making a hard push to keep him at home. And like you mentioned, Knighton was involved, Odell, Tony White, of course, Mike Norvell. All those guys, I think, in some way played a factor in him staying with Florida State. And it came down to, I think, simply put, the same reasons he committed there. Comfortability, the people, yes, there were some changes in the staffs and all that. But again, it goes back to what I said about Kromah. Norvell's still the guy. And I think he's one of the most active head coaches that I hear about from recruiting these kids actively, not just one phone call a month, just not when you're on campus, but being active in their recruitment. And again, I think it paid off here. Yes, Knighton came in, did a good job. Odell's been around Florida State 30 plus years. That connection is there. No doubt about that. But a lot of things played into this, and he sees a chance to play early. I think the biggest thing was about even South Carolina and Georgia was, who would he be behind if he came into Georgia? Even Carolina has a very good, defensive front. They're active in the portal as well. He sees an opening at Florida State to play. But again, another huge win that came down to the wire. And yes, the ones that get all the the buzz and the clicks and talked about are the flips, but hanging on to a guy like Kevin Wynn, like Chase Lofton, deserves just as much promotion from a Florida State class as those flips do, in my opinion.
Yeah, certainly, no doubt. And then we mentioned this before. You mentioned Knighton. There's some really good additions that they added to their staff. I know some that you have history with. I would think Gus Malzahn is certainly one, the offensive coordinator, and then Herb Hand's been around everywhere. But just talk about that new staff and how that kind of generates and changes things, because there had to be a change coming up with the way the last season went, which is shockingly, I think, to everyone. But just adding those guys, you can start with Gus if you want to. So I know you know Gus really well as far as what his pedigree is, but just adding those guys, how does that, I guess, what's the perception nationally on FSU now with those ads? And then two, just how do you think that's going to work out?
I think the perception probably I got from that just over the last couple of months, I would say, is that Mike Norvell is not scared to make a change. You have to, when you're the head guy, you're kind of the CEO now of a program. It's not like the old days where you're just coaching football and that's your job. There's so much more that has evolved, from NIL to roster management to portal to all of you're hiring. Every position coach has assistant coach to an assistant coach to an assistant coach below them. I mean, you're managing an army. So I think the big thing for me is that Norvell isn't scared to make change and do big moves, from OC to DC to position coaches to I think it allows him all. He's an offensive minded guy. People know about his history as a quarterbacks guy, things like that. But it allows him to kind of almost step back and be that CEO. Let Gus run the offense, let Gus run the quarterback room, which he has a history with guys like Cam Newton. He got Bo Nix to Auburn first, and Bo's having a great start to his NFL career. One thing about Gus we know is that he is a creative offensive mind. That is his baby, is offense. He's been a great head coach. He's won at Auburn. He had some good years at UCF. He's done great things as a head coach, no doubt. But he is an offensive guy. He wants to be in that room. He wants to be on that side of the practice fields. He wants to be involved in that strategy, that game management, the game changes. So, I think it was a win-win. Gus was ready to get, I think, away from UCF, and that we see that often now. A lot that comes with being a head coach, you can't really coach anymore, and that's his passion. He wants to have a hand in that offense, in that room. And look, Gus, I think it's going to be fun to watch. I mean, he's always about trickery, always about formations, personnel groupings, kind of throwing guys off and doing fun things. So I think FSU will like what Gus brings as a coordinator. We know he can recruit. A lot of these guys they're recruiting now grew up watching Cam Newton. They know about him being a Heisman Trophy winner, being the first NFL pick in the draft, him being MVP for the Carolina Panthers. I mean, Cam's all about a big personality. He always talks Auburn up. He talks about Malzahn in a positive way. That's another plus, in my opinion, for Florida State, that they know what he is and what he's about. And then on the other side, I mean, you got a guy like Tony White who kind of brings, I think, that physical mentality, that aggressive defensive style where, you want that. Everybody talks about the ACC, not the physicality of a Big Ten or an SEC conference. So, if you can bring a mind like that is about that toughness, that wants to get in the trenches, build a physical front, you win the game there on the defensive side of the ball. Tony brings that. Knighton, Evan Cooper came with him from Nebraska as well, all in the same mindset, the same mentality. That's going to bring that. They had that, the black shirt out there in Nebraska, that kind of toughness, old school mentality. To me, that's going to be kind of refreshing, at Florida State as well, to bring a whole new attitude to the defense that trickles down to who they recruit, how they recruit, and the kind of player they look for to kind of fit into his scheme that he wants from a personality, not just a football standpoint, but that personality, man, to be tough, to be physical, to be aggressive, to play hard on 3rd and short, 4th and goal, make that play, go a little bit harder than the other guy on the other side of the ball. So I think it was two great hires. And you bring other guys. You mentioned Herb Hand, not to leave him out, but an old school, offensive line guy. Then to mix that with a guy like Tim Harris Jr., more of the younger side. He relates to receivers. I mean, you had Ron Dugans, who had been there for a while, had been at Miami, he has some roots in Florida. He had a good, I guess, people thought highly of him as well, but it's just kind of shaking up the room. A new age guy, younger. I hear a lot about energy with Coach Harris. So he'll relate to those guys you want to get to come in that receiver room.
Now, you're dealing with these recruits, not so much the staff, because I think they're still getting to know them, but what's kind of the national perception of recruits after FSU came off that 2-10 season? I know FSU is still FSU and the standard doesn't change, but just kind of what's the perception with recruits, either 25 or 26, of just where you think their minds are with FSU?
Look, to me, like you said, Michael, I mean, FSU is FSU. I mean, to me, it's really, they didn't see it going the way it went, like basically flipped upside down from the year before when you were ACC champions and finished 13-1 and were, probably should have been in the playoffs and stuff like that. So it basically went from one end to the other in the snap of the fingers, between those two seasons. But I mean, in all honesty, I think that's where we're at in college football right now. I mean, that's just where we're at with going back to the transfer portal, the roster management, trying to blend the recruits from high school in with guys that come in that have been there for 6 months to make a team, learn the scheme, buy in, all as one. Look, we're in a me world, man. These kids are about me. Where can I get paid the most? Where can I maximize my NIL brand the most? It's not all. I'm not saying every kid. That's just the world we live in, where in the old days, I was talking about this week with a coach. We grew up watching Miami versus Florida State in the 80s, the 90s, the early 2000s. Probably not you, Matt. You're too young. But you know the rivalry. Those guys played as a team. They hated each other. They weren't transferring from Miami to play at Florida State or vice versa. Now it's a common thing. It's just a different game. So, look, I don't think the perceptions really changed much. Look, Mike Norvell made the changes needed. He knew he had to do something there with the program. I think kids see that, they respect that, they appreciate that, and it goes back again. Florida State, still Florida State. They had a down year after a great year. Mike's built that program up from the time he got there. They had a down year, and the positive side about all this is the game we live in now with the portal and all that. Is as quickly as you're down, you can rise right back up. So FSU has that chance this year.
Yeah, and Chad, I know you talked about it on the signing day show back in December, but how much did Florida State need that season to end to even build any momentum when it came to recruiting? It felt like every time they tried to build momentum or were about to, you get Byron Lewis. Obviously, Byron Lewis ended up flipping to UF, but you get Byron Lewis, you start to get some momentum, and then you see the product on field wasn't great. How much did they just need that season to end to get back into recruiting momentum, really?
Yeah, I mean, when it's 1 week after another and you're playing the same and the outcome is the same, you want it to be done. I mean, Mike Norvell can say all you want. You want to practice, you want to get the young guys reps, and you want to get game experience for next year, and that's all great. But when you're playing like that and you know where your season's at, you can't reach your goals, you're not going to be in the playoffs, you're not going to be in the ACC championship game, I think you are kind of counting down those days, because you do know you want to make the hires. And for that to happen, typically has to be at the end of the season. And the way this year was, with the signing day being so early, that first week of December, basically the week that the season ends on Thanksgiving week, you're trying to put a staff together, get the guys on campus for those last minute OVs, make those last 2 or 3 days phone calls. But yeah, I think it was when you're having a season like that, you're putting out fires on the recruiting trail every week, trying to convince kids that, hey, we're still going to come back next year. We're going to bounce. We're still working. We still have the same attitude, the same mentality. We're still Florida State. But look, man, the kids want to see it on the field more times than not. But again, it goes back to that's just one season. So you can remind those guys this time, if you're in October, November, and you're losing this game or this game, hey, this time a year ago, we were winning this game. We're playing for the ACC championship. We're beating Clemson. We're playing for the playoff spot. You can remind them that, look, we had an off season. Come be a part of us to kind of get this energy back in Tallahassee and to bring it back to a championship roster. So yeah, you do want the season to end for a lot of different reasons, from the staff, making changes, to putting the recruiting final touches on that recruiting class as well.